Welcome back. Well, running a business is exciting. It's about innovation, growth, and building something of your own. But for many entrepreneurs, long-term financial planning often takes a backseat. Without the safety net of employer-sponsored benefits, business owners need to be strategic about securing their retirement and protecting their wealth. To unpack how entrepreneurs can plan for retirement, we're joined by Graydon Morris from Sterling Private Wealth. Thank you so much for your time, Graydon. Now, for some of us, the concept of wealth management sounds rather intimidating. So just break it down for us in terms of the goals that it should be achieving and the tools that are used in this endeavor.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, firstly. Yeah, look, I guess for everyone's wealth management journey is really about securing a comfortable retirement. That means different things for different people. But essentially, anyone working with a financial planner or wealth manager, what they would be looking to do is to set a target at some future date of a net present value of capital they would require at that point. And then, of course, the income that present value of capital can provide them with for the balance of their lifetimes. And obviously with improved medical care and the like, longevity is increasing. So it's an enhanced risk that the assets you build over your lifetime can last you for the balance of your lifetime.
I mean, just particularly looking at entrepreneurs, because I mean, when one is under the employment of an institution, there are structures in place that make managing money easier, and you know, the job stability helps as well. I spoke in my intro of the safety net of employer-sponsored benefits, but with entrepreneurs, they deal with a lot of risk and they navigate change more frequently. So how do you tailor your solutions to accommodate the landscape of how they work and earn money?
Yeah. Firstly, may I say, formal employment, as it were, does give some security around formal retirement funding. I guess there's an element of fragility in that too, in terms of job losses, etc. In some instances, entrepreneurs don't necessarily face that. But be that as it may, even those formally employed individuals need to supplement that retirement saving over and above, you know, what they may be contributing in a retirement fund space. But to your point around, let's say, entrepreneurs, the focus is so much on building the business, you know, allocating as much of their personal capital and wealth to the growth of that business, that sometimes they overlook the risks that are obviously associated with that in terms of, you know, would they be able to sell the business for the value they perceive it to be at retirement, firstly, or, you know, some sort of catastrophic implosion, technology disruption in their business that renders it worthless. So alongside building that wealth through the growth of the business, they need to use structures in place, tax concession type structures, whether it's retirement annuities or setting formal retirement funds in place within their business, tax-free savings accounts, you know, utilizing trust to protect assets from creditors as the retirement annuity assets or retirement fund assets formally are protected from creditors. To ensure that, you know, should something go wrong with the business, they are catered for. And yeah, it's a very delicate balancing act, because dealing with many entrepreneurs over many years, the rhetoric generally is, well, you know, my business is currently, you know, generating a return on equity of X or what have you. You know, can you match that in the market, whether that's passive or active management? And it's a difficult discussion to have, because it's not just about, let's say, return. It's about balancing that risk of providing for retirement.
And actually. Actually, on that point, I mean, as I mentioned, entrepreneurs deal with a lot of risk all the time. But does that mean that even with their wealth management journey, they need to take the high risk, high reward path?
Yeah. On the contrary, I would think what they should be looking to do, particularly if their business is in a high-risk environment, you know, potentially to not necessarily adopt too aggressive a stance from an asset allocation perspective in respect of their private savings, that it is a safety net, it is a safety blanket. And in addition to that, obviously, someone, particularly, say, in South Africa, who builds a very SA-centric, growth-oriented business would need to diversify offshore to offset that risk. Whereas traditionally, someone who's setting aside passive investments from a salary would inherently, in any event, have a good offshore-onshore balance. But as an entrepreneur's business grows locally, they would need to, he or her would need to supplement or complement that by a healthy international exposure.
Now, entrepreneurs occupy every level of the income spectrum. Are there tools that entrepreneurs that have not accumulated great wealth can use to protect their positions?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, these formal structures in place absolutely should be the first port of call.
Yeah.
Retirement fund contributions in South Africa in any event are capped at, say, from a tax deductibility perspective, 27.5% of income or 350,000 Rand per annum. But I think from a protection perspective, not just from a wealth accumulation perspective, entrepreneurs obviously need to look at trust structures, etc., to protect them from creditors, and particularly from a long-term estate planning perspective. If a business's growth is going to explode exponentially, it makes a lot of sense to hold that shareholding in a trust structure where a lot of that growth will occur outside of the estate duty environment for an entrepreneur.
Great. And I mean, in terms of guiding entrepreneurs through their wealth management journey, where does your role as Sterling Private Wealth start and end? And really, what does the full service of wealth management for an entrepreneur look like?
Essentially, our business would see themselves as a sort of non-executive director, as it were, of an entrepreneur's life, or a CFO in a say personal capacity, guiding, mentoring, assisting. And that's not just from setting an investment objective and investment strategy perspective. You mentioned it earlier, what should their risk profile look like? That is obviously completely dependent on the individual's risk tolerance, in some cases their personality, the way they see the world. But it's about setting the appropriate benchmark for the appropriate individual. So the role is very much that, but it's a partnership role. And in addition to that, it's about managing the risk of the exposure to the business relative to the exposure to other, let's call it passive type or long-term type investments outside of the business. That can also lead to discussions around at what point they should be diversifying from their entrepreneurial ventures, whether that's whole or in part, and managing that succession plan in that light.
All right. Well, we do have to wrap up the conversation there, but thank you so much for giving us insights and unpacking this very important tool for entrepreneurs as they plan for their retirement. That was Graydon Morris from Sterling Private Wealth.